Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome.
I think as we get closer to the holidays, we're going to probably have a little bit smaller, more intimate crew here. So hopefully we can get to everyone's questions tonight, which would be fantastic. As you all are jumping in, I'm gonna launch a really quick poll. Just it helps me and Kevin know who's joining us. So I'm assuming most of you are parents, but if you're not, just you can obviously answer this as well. But love to know what grade level your child is in, just to help us. As we imagine, mostly 10th and 11th graders. So that's perfect.
Exactly what we would have expected.
Yes. All right. So I think we'll do quick intros for people that this is their first time on a webinar with us. And then Kevin will kind of intro College Aid Pro, and then we'll get into admissions and then financial aid for you and be done by 9 o'clock Eastern time. But my name is Joe Korfmacher. I am an admissions expert here with College Aid Pro. I've been in the field for 16 years, really my whole career. Worked for 10 years at two different private high schools as a school counselor, college counselor, and director of college counseling at a private all boys school in Manhattan. And I spent 5 years at another company doing private admissions counseling, and I work as a consultant at a small liberal arts college upstate doing admissions counseling, and here full time with College Aid Pro. And I work with a bunch of different families from freshman year through senior year of high school, helping them navigate the entire process. And happy to be here tonight, share some tips and just some information, things that are going on in the world of college admissions that hopefully will help you guys.
I think you undersold yourself. Guys, Joe is
Wow.
amazing when it comes to college admissions. He's literally the person I go to with all of my questions. Um, Pretty much like once a day now.
Mhm.
Um, but and no name drop. The colleges or the high schools. Like you,
Yeah.
anyways, Joe's amazing. I do not do college admissions. I solely work with families on the college financial aid process. Little bit of background. I got into this from the financial services industry. Didn't really like that as much. Fell in love with the financial aid, right? The FAFSA, the CSS appeals, you name it. Fell in love with that process, and that is all I do now. And by the way, I'm Kevin Murphy, one of the experts here on the team. And yeah, I'm in New Jersey, as is Joe. And trying to think what else. I don't know. I think that's enough about me for tonight. But a little bit about us. We are College Aid Pro, and our goal is to help families shop smarter for college. That's the primary one. But our goal is really to just empower you to do this process the right way, right? To give you the knowledge, to give you the tools, maybe to individually help some of you, but really just make sure you understand this process and you know exactly what you're signing up for in terms of the costs of colleges and how to navigate all of this. So let me kick off and start screen sharing. Bear with me, and then we'll go from there. And then Joe already mentioned that we're going to try to get to as many questions as possible. Please put all of your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat. And then in addition to that, any admissions questions we're going to reserve, you can put them in the chat, but I'll probably end up leaving them for Joe to answer when he's done. And then the same probably for financial aid. But anyways, I'll kick it off or kick it over to you, Joe.
Yeah, great. And yeah, just as a reminder, questions, Q&A, we'll get them answered either in the chat. I'll write them out or we'll answer them live. Again, smaller crowd tonight, which is great. So try to answer them all. And we'll save the chat for Kevin and I will post some things in there for you guys to click on and review. So Q&A, please. And yes, this will be recorded and the webinar itself will be sent out. Access to the deck will not, but if you watch the webinar, obviously you'll see the deck in there. Is that correct, Kevin? They won't get the deck.
Yeah, we don't share the PowerPoint, everyone, but we do share the recording, and you will see the recording usually by tomorrow morning. But we'll drop links to all of that stuff towards the end of the presentation.
Yeah, great. All right. So way back when, story time in 2003, I had hair and was a senior in high school and applying to college. And I did it on my dining room table. I did it with pen and paper, printed out the Common App and application. I applied to about 6 schools. I applied to where my sister went and where some friends were applying to, and that was it. And I think my parents were involved. I'm not sure, but I got into a few schools, ended up going to college, and it was great. Fast forward to 2025. It's a little bit different of a story now and process, and can quite frankly be overwhelming just with how competitive it is and how expensive college has become. I still have conversation with my dad, and he can't believe how much more money college is than when I was there, 2 decades ago. So there's a lot. And these are some of the questions that you're seeing on the screen right now that we get asked every day from, should I take the SAT or ACT? How important is testing now? Are we too late to, will we get financial aid? Have we saved enough? And all of them are very important and all relative. And, this is what we do at College Aid Pro. We have a team of pros from all over the country, both for the financial aid side and admissions. We've been helping families all together for the last, 20 plus, years. And our job is to make this as simple as possible and ensure that you all are successful, enjoy it a little bit, and have a lot of, acceptances and in your future, and aren't breaking the bank to send your children to college.
I have to throw something in there. I don't think I've ever even told you this story, but guys, when I applied to college, my college admissions consultant made me use gold paper clips because
Oh,
back then that was when you still mailed college applications. But anyways,
that's probably why I didn't get into my reach school. I didn't
yeah,
use mail or
no,
gold.
no gold paper clip.
Yeah, only
But
standard ones. Thanks. Thanks, Dad, for not giving me that insight. All right, so navigating the maze, and it is a maze. There's thousands of colleges in the U.S. alone. All right, and how do we get from all right? There's thousands of colleges to I'm accepted to the schools I want and ultimately attend the college I want. And there's a bunch of different factors that we will talk about tonight. So academic fit, personal fit, will you be happy there? Financial fit, can we afford it? And we have this list. So now, what's the strategy to get in and ensure that we have enough money to pay for it? With that final list of schools, and to ultimately get accepted and attend the college that you will enjoy, or your child will enjoy, for 4 years, and you can, sleep easy at night knowing that you can afford it. So that's our job navigating. We want to talk through that today with you guys. One at first, and we promised this in the, emailing, talk through some mission trends. One thing that is not on here, and Kevin and I were talking about before we started, is I just read in the New York Times that the international population, we just saw a decrease in 1% of applications so far, which is lower than I think a lot of us expected. Definitely me, with everything going on, in our federal government. We expected more international students to take a year or two off from applying to U.S. schools, just to kind of see what would happen, with everything going on there. But so far, the decrease was not as significant as we thought, which leads me right into application inflation. Has changed the odds, and this has been happening really for the last 10 to 15 years. Each year that I've been in this, I've seen it get tougher and tougher. Colleges that when I started that were safeties for all are now reaches for most. But last year alone, in the 24-25 cycle, there was a 6% in the number of students applying via the Common App, which is the main way that students apply to college. And this, basically affected, which schools would ultimately be safeties, targets, reaches, as we're building that balanced list. And most students, naturally overestimated, their chances and fell short, with the increased competition. And Kevin and I are both in New Jersey, so like a local school here, NYU, very popular. across the world, they've increased more than 50% in their applications over the past 5 years, and it's now placed as the fifth most applied to college in the country. The top four all happen to be part of the UC system. So UC Irvine, UC Berkeley, UC San Diego, and the top of the list is UCLA, which actually received last year over 146,000 applications. So yeah, one school, almost 150,000 applications, and they just look to bring in about 11,000 first year students. So big school, but 11,000 compared to just short of 150. So you can see where the odds are not really in your favor there. Second, selective majors. This really has changed too, and something that as parents you really want to focus on when you're building that college list, whether you're working with a counselor, a private counselor, or school counselor, just doing it with your child alone. It's not just the school, but what is your son or daughter majoring in, because admission counselors will look at that. And some majors, like business, like computer science, engineering, they had far lower admit rates than the colleges themselves. So if you can Google University of Tennessee admission rate and get the number. But if you do University of Tennessee, computer science or engineering, you're going to find a much smaller, a lower rate there. So, and many families incorrectly assume that like getting into a top major at public university is actually easier than maybe even an Ivy League school. And sometimes that's not even true. In reality, some of the most selective academic programs in the country, are now in public flagship schools, and their admit rate, rival the Ivies. Part of this is finance, right? It's, especially if you're in state, it can be much more affordable to go to a really good in-state program. But for instance, UCLA computer science admitted fewer than 3% of applicants last year, and UT Austin Macomb School of Business admitted fewer than 10% of applicants last year. And if you're out of state, your admit rate was even lower, because UT Austin, for anyone on here who's thinking about it, they need about 92% of their incoming class just from the state of Texas. So leaves all the other states, for domestic applications fighting, over 8%. And admission officers, though, are looking very much at each application through the lens of what we call fit to major. Third one here, many top schools filled their freshman class through binding early decision. Those new to this, early decision means that, if you apply, you're committing to the school. You love it. You've done your research. That's where you want to go. If you get in, you will, withdraw your other applications, and that's where you're going. However, you are committing to it both, academically, that's where you're going, but also, a lot of times financially as well. But something you definitely want to think about. And for some schools, it's almost impossible to be admitted unless you apply early, such as a Tulane, for instance. We'll pick on them. You pretty much have to apply early if you want to get in there. Vanderbilt last year admitted 61% of its incoming class through early decision. And Northeastern, this year intends to fill more than half their class through early decision. If you're thinking about applying early decision, this is a good time to use that, chat. Feel free to let us know a school that I know we have juniors and sophomores here, but if you're thinking of early decision, let us know. Love to find out and see that. I would say, something there just to think about. Early decision very much is, helps the colleges. It helps them, with their yield. University of Michigan, this is their first year that they're offering early decision. They won't come out and say it, but most likely they're doing it because of the potential in international drops. And they want to, make sure they have their confirmed yeses early, so as they build out their class. And a lot of people will apply to Michigan as Michigan is an amazing school, but may apply to it sort of like a backup to maybe the Ivies or Duke or Tufts or schools like that. And they're now all of a sudden offering early decision this year. And that's really to help them confirm their class, and it can definitely help you. Gives you a better chance at a lot of colleges apply early decision, but you are committing, and it keeps you from other schools and maybe other financial packages. So definitely something that you want to seriously consider while you're working on your plan. Um, Test scores, return to power. Yeah, so during COVID, uh, every college had to basically go test optional or test free, meaning that they didn't, look at them at all. The UCs have kept it that way, test free, but they had to go test optional because students literally could not take the test for admission cycle. But over the last couple of years, schools have been creeping back to requiring them. All the Ivies now require them. A lot of state schools require them. Tennessee, North Carolina, other states, and just a lot of schools. And we're seeing more and more each year. And what I'm advising every family I work with, whether you're a strong test taker or not, just pick a test, SAT or ACT, do some pre-test, decide which is the best test for you, and then sign up for 2 or 3 SATs or ACTs during your junior year, and give it your best. If you have the funds to do so, pay for a tutor. If not, there's free online prep you can get, through both of the services, ACT and College Board that does the SAT. But prepare, do your best, because there, is a very direct correlation with higher test scores and getting into schools, and potentially getting scholarship money as well. So try your best, do your best, and if the scores aren't where they need to be, it is obviously very possible to build a really strong list for test optional schools as well. And finally, personal narrative. So that's the essay when we say that. That's really the one major area that's qualitative on the student's admissions package or admissions application. You have their test scores, you have their courses, their grades, their activities, all that. The essay is a chance for the student to really share their voice, their story with the very human admissions reader. It still is done by humans for now. But the personal narrative remains one of the most powerful ways to stand out, especially when grades and test scores, they can look similar to applicants. You need a 4.0 and 1,500 to be considered at Notre Dame. What's after that? Your child's brand, in a way, is most clearly communicated through the Common App's personal statement and the activities list as well. However, with the rise of AI, chat GPT, everything, some colleges are questioning the authenticity of written responses. As a result, there's a growing speculation that video submissions are recorded interviews, may become more, common part of the process. So we're on the lookout for that. Right now, the essay is still very much in play. Every student I work with, I'm helping them with their personal narrative, their personal statement, their supplemental essays, all of that. And it's a very big piece of the process. But we'll see. We'll see. It's possible that, video submissions and interviews, as I just said, will become more part. But anyway, students who can articulate their story clearly across any medium will have, definitely a major advantage. We'll go on to the next. Great. So I want to see in the chat real quick, if we can, get on your keyboard, what's the best college in the country? I will stare at Kevin until someone puts an answer in. Wake Forest, love it. Wake Forest is a very good school. Morehouse, love it. Well, depends on what you want to study. That. Yep. All right. So all great schools in there that you said, and as you may have guessed, UPenn, one of the toughest ones to get into. No such thing as the best college. We firmly, and most people in our industry believe it's the right school. So 4,000 colleges. We want to find the right school for you. Big, small, state, private, co-op programs, liberal arts, near the beach, in the city, rural. Where are you going to be happy for 4 years? Where will you be successful? You're spending, as the parents here, a lot of money for your child to go there. We want them out in 4 years, have a great experience, make amazing friends, connections, have the degree, and then start making money. So how do we do that? And we like to use a funnel system here at College A Pro, which we'll show in a second. So again, thousands of schools at the top. A lot of different ways you can go about this. We generally like to start, especially as you get, through sophomore year into junior year, definitely in the, summer before senior year, and when you're applying as a senior, finding colleges that have the right academic fit. We think this is a must-have. This is the primary reason college exists and why you go. So do you want finance? Do you want risk management? Do you want a school with a really good pre-law track? Connections to good law schools? Co-op for business technology. There's a school nearby me. I'm in northern New Jersey. Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken has amazing co-op program for all their majors, but they're right across the river from Wall Street. So a lot of people will do internships and co-ops in business technology. Do you want a really good engineering co-op like at Drexel in Philadelphia? Do you want a 5-year physician's assistance program that Lemoyne College has in Syracuse? Do you want to be a vet? Maybe LIU Post in Long Island or Rowan in New Jersey would be a good fit. To me, the obvious criteria when determining whether or not a college is an academic fit first is, does it offer the program, obviously, that you want to study? And after that, will you be for academic peers? There's a number of other criteria that we recommend and that you don't overlook, such as the learning environment, is the college teaching via traditional lectures? Are your first 2 years, are you with 500 other students where the professor really isn't teaching, it's a TA, they don't know your name, your grade is based off of 2 tests? Or do you have from day one, classroom of 20 students and classroom participation, and actually going to class matters to the teacher? What's important? Is it project-based learning? What environment will you excel in? Does the college offer an honors program? What's the student faculty ratio? How are the learning help accommodations? Your child, what they need. Does that college offer it? Will they be successful there? So once we find those majors that they offer it, and how well we do that, after that, we want to go right in the financial fit. In order to know if you can afford a college, you first need to know, your budget. Just like anything else, the federal government is no longer writing blank checks, for you to cash to pay for college. They're capping their loans. So do you know how much you can afford to pay cash for college? Do you know how much a bank is going to lend you in a personal loan, without any collateral? With the passing of the big, beautiful bill, this step, it's no longer something you can skip. And Kevin's going to get much more into that. But you can't kick it down the road anymore, and that you're going to figure it out. This is something that we definitely can help. But schools can go up to $100,000+ a year right now. There's students that I'm working with that $400,000 is what it may cost for them if they want to go there. Right. That I'm sure is all a much bigger number than when you were going to school. Then after that, personal fit. So I love telling my students that I work with this because they're most of them are pretty high achieving and work hard. They're in high school 35, 40 hours a week. Let them know that for college, they're going to be in class maybe 15 hours a week. So what will you be doing with your time outside the classroom? What clubs are there? Do you want? I was on a call earlier tonight with a student for our first meeting. He wants a school big football. He wants to go to those games. That's important to him. A bunch of Saturdays of his college career, he wants to be rooting for a team and part of that atmosphere. Do you want to be near a city? Do you want to, walk out of the classroom and be able to go a block or two down the street and not be part of the college community for a little bit and just be part of the city? Um, are there research opportunities for you within in the school? A million different things. Visiting super important, yes. But you don't have to do that anymore in 2025. Going forward, obviously you can go online, YouTube, Reddit, the school websites, but get involved. The more, just like anything else, you want to be a good consumer here, and the more work that as parents and hopefully your children do here, to find that personal fit, the happier they will be, regardless if it's a good academic or financial fit. If they're not happy there personally, they're not going to make it through the 4 years. And then finally, just the top 10 getting to, and really, to be honest, it's more like 10 to 14 now. When I started this 16 years ago, it was 6 to 8 schools you'd apply to. It's become too competitive, too expensive. So you need to have options. So we're really in a 10 to 14 right now. All right. And then we can, go through all these. You can go the selectivity side.
Yep.
Yeah, you go to the next one. Get to you in a bit. One more. I'll talk about that in a second. Cool. Awesome. And the one that we just passed, so selectivity, you don't want to be in a position when you're finalizing your list that you have a list of 10 schools that are all under 25% admit rate. That puts you in a very bad position. All right. So the most selective schools will be 10% or below, but very selectives are 25% below. That means, obviously 75% or less, are not getting in. All right. So you want to make sure your list is balanced. You want to make sure you have schools on there with higher admission rates. It does not mean they're bad schools at all. It just means that, they're less selective, but if they have your academic programs, a good personal fit, those schools with higher admission rates could also be a better financial fit with merit scholarships as well. So very, very super important to make sure that the list is balanced with a handful of safeties that your child likes and would see themselves at. Last thing for me is our strategy, defense versus offense. Defense strategy is it's all about the hard measurable. So the things that you need just to get your foot into the door, especially at more selective colleges. This is what you want just to have like a real solid look from the college admission counselor. So GPA for sure. All right, that's top. Why is that most important? Because it's 3 years of work. All right, so it's freshman, junior, sophomore, or freshman, sophomore, junior year of high school. What have you taken? How have you done? Have you, progressed in your rigor? Right? If your school offers APs, are you taking more as a junior? Your senior year schedule that they will see. Are you taking the most rigorous schedule if you've done well the first few years? And you should. All that matters. And most colleges are looking at the entire transcript. It's not just that GPA that people get fixated on. It's really the whole picture, because you could have a 4.0 GPA and have taken 0 honors and APs. If you're applying to an Ivy, a 3.9 with a bunch of APs and honors looks better. Okay. Test scores, again, talked about that earlier. They're back. They can mean a lot, especially at more selective colleges. And I think to me, it is important to put some investment into preparing for those. Course rigor, chat about class rank, unless you're in Texas and a couple other states, most high schools actually don't do rank. But for those that do, if you're a parent here where your school does rank, it definitely has implications. It helps colleges see just how your child ranks against their peers at the school. If your school, I guess my point here is find out if your high school does ranking. If it does, it's something you should look out for your child. These really are checklist items. At most public universities, these numbers often determine whether the application is even reviewed. If you don't meet those benchmarks, it's hard to even play in the game. But really, just the beginning. The offense is your edge. This is where the real admission strategy and scholarship leverage happens. This is, how you separate yourself from, thousands of other students who may have, similar grades and scores. So this includes demonstrated interest. Um, are you reaching out to your regional rep? Did you go to a campus tour or virtual session? Schools track this. Um, as I mentioned earlier, I do a little missions um, review for a college, and they see everything, every point of contact they note, and they know if you open up their emails, if you filled out a prospective student form online, they can even track if you have social media and you follow their admissions count. All this is giving them a sense of, if we accept the student, what are the chances that they show up next fall? It helps them build out their class. Quick story. If you've been on this before, I'm sorry for hearing again, but a student a dozen years ago, one of the brightest kids I've worked with, applied to a bunch of schools, but his top four were Michigan, MIT, Stanford, and Harvard. And he ended up getting into MIT, Stanford, and Harvard, but not Michigan. Michigan's a great school, but not at the MIT, Stanford, or Harvard level for the program that he was looking at. And I called them up. I knew the reason, but just wanted to do a little research. And they say he didn't visit when we came to his high school. Never emailed the admission rep. We just, we see, how bright he is. We just had a sense that, he wasn't going to come. So we didn't want to waste one of our acceptances on him. So what I'll leave you here with this is every student on your child's list, make sure, whether it's their top school or their 10th school, that they show love to the college. And the first time that the school hears about your student, that like they're in their system, should not be when they apply. If that's happening, that's a bad thing. Next, the activity section. You guys are on their classroom, so I won't go too deep in this, but on the Common App, you have up to 10 activities. No need to do all 10. What are 4 or 5 things, activities that your child is really invested with? That should be on it. Really, very much is all about quality over quantity here. Admissions counselors will read this very quick, but they just want a sense of, what outside of the classroom does this person get involved in and why. They can really learn a lot about them. And finally, talk about the essay earlier. I'll talk quickly about the letters of recommendation, especially for parents here that are juniors, parents of juniors. Junior year generally is the best year to have 1 to 2 teacher letters of recommendation, just because it's the last year where it's been a full year class before they're applying to college in fall of senior year. If they know they want to do an engineer or a business major, it could be helpful to have a math, or hard science teacher write the recommendation. But really just a teacher that knows them well, can talk through their strengths of a student. It's not about what they're involved in outside of school, but who they are in the classroom. And as parents of juniors right now, you should have those conversations like, who do you think you may want to ask at the end of junior year to write those letters of recommendation? But I'll end with, when done well, the offense here that we talked about, can very much override average measurables. Students with lower test scores, or maybe unhooked profiles, can still get into really good schools because their applications have a strong narrative, strategy, personal clarity. And that's what we're here to help with on the admissions side. Thanks for listening. I'll jump into the Q&A. Any questions, throw them in there. Happy to answer them. I'll pass it off to Kevin.
Not a lot of questions tonight. I'm very surprised. But there's one waiting for you there.
I've answered them all in my talking points.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? I will, just for the sake of time, we'll come back to this to MyCap in a second, but I will drop in the chat. Actually, you know what, Joe? Do you mind putting in the chat MyCap? mycap.collegeaidpro.com. We had someone write in before. Is it still worth applying for financial aid? And I'll talk about that in a minute, but a really good starting point to figure out kind of financial fit, as Joe was explaining, and also if you're going to get money and how much colleges are going to cost, is by creating a free MyCap account. you'll put in some basic information like your income, your assets, your student's GPA, maybe test scores if you have them at this point, and you'll get cost projections for pretty much every college in the country. Obviously, only the ones that you put in that they want to apply to. But so now let's talk a little bit about financial aid. Now that you're well informed on the admissions process, and I think financial aid, it's very easy to just understand as a discount, right? Think about it as a big umbrella. Ultimately, regardless of how they give you the money or why they give you the money, it's a discount on the cost of college. Now, there are different types of discounts. One of those is need-based grants. And with need-based grants, that is going to be based on your income and your assets. It's based on your financial profile, right? Some schools even look at how much home equity you have. And for need-based grants, you have to qualify for them, but they're totally different than merit-based scholarships. Merit-based scholarships have nothing to do with your finances. They're solely based on your students' talent profile, right? Their GPA, their test scores, maybe even something like it's a little bit different, but maybe like they're in the marching band, or maybe they're going to get an athletic scholarship, or they're in the choir and Sacred Heart's going to give them $10,000 a year, right? There's different ways to get money that have nothing to do with your income or your assets. And then the last type of aid under this big, big umbrella is self-help. And self-help, most importantly, is not free money. Self-help is loans and work study, right? So ultimately, you either have to pay it back with interest or you have to work for it, or your students have to work for it. So that's overall in terms of financial aid. Now, how do you know if you're eligible for need-based grants? The formula that's on the screen is really the starting point, right? I mean, you need to know this to understand how much financial aid you're eligible for. So you'd be looking at the cost of attendance, which is the sticker price, right? Then you'd be subtracting out what your student aid index is, and that number is calculated based on a percentage of income, a percentage of assets. The difference between the two, that's your need. That's how much financial aid you qualify for, right? So let's just say, for example, the cost of attendance at a school is 90, right? Let's say that you make 200,000 and your student aid index is around 50 grand, right? You qualify for $40,000 of free money. The tricky part doesn't mean the college is going to give it to you, right? It's completely up to the college how much they give. I actually used or referenced how UCLA doesn't give any money to out-of-state students, right? So even though UCLA is $80,000, if your student aid index was 50, UCLA would still cost you $80,000. And there's a lot of schools that are like that, but for the most part, right, this is going to be incredibly school specific. That's why you've got MyCap. That's why you can use, us as resources to figure that all out. But it's going to be very, very specific to the school, how much need-based aid they actually give, and obviously your student aid index. Now, it's important to understand, especially when planning ahead, right? Most families tonight either have juniors or sophomores. You still have the opportunity to make adjustments to assets. To do that, you need to know how are assets counted. And student assets have a really, really significant impact on college financial aid, right? Student assets, let's just say your child has 10 grand in a savings account. That's going to be assessed at 20% on the FAFSA and 25% or more on the CSS profile. And if that's the case, that $10,000 reduced your eligibility by $2,500 per year at a CSS profile school. And if you think about that, in 4 years, it's gone. So student assets really do have a big negative impact for college financial aid. Now, parental assets, those are counted at a much lower percentage, 5.64%. So that means that if you have, let's say, 100 grand in savings, it increases your student aid index by around $5,600. So definitely a really, really big difference there in terms of the impact. And when you're filing the financial aid forms, you would be reporting all non-retirement assets, whether that be cash, checking, savings, whether that be brokerage accounts, whether that be a 529. We'll talk about 529s in a second, but you're reporting all of them. You're not reporting things like 401ks and IRAs and life insurance and annuities and things like that, right? So just non-retirement assets. Also, what I do want to go back a slide real quick. It's the current value as of the day of filing. So there's plenty of opportunity to have a junior, a sophomore, or freshman to still make adjustments well in advance of filing financial aid forms. It's also important to consider how they look at income. So we'll talk about 529s now. So really big factor in terms of how you report a 529 is going to be based on who's the owner. And let's just say that a grandparent owned a 529. Guess what? You don't include it. Let's say that you owned a 529 for, you've got one student whose FAFSA you're filing, and then you have two younger children, and you owned a 529 for each of them. Well, on the FAFSA, you only include the 529 for the student whose form you're filing, not for your, hypothetically, your other two children. So really, this is a recent shift. This actually, within the last couple of years, this is a big change where now there's also planning opportunities around how you position 529s. Now, what you do report, right? Parent-owned 529s. And right, if you own a 529, your student whose FAFSA you're filing is the beneficiary, that is what you report. Not only that, but in a divorced or separated situation, right? Let's say that there's, obviously you always have the custodial, the primary parent, and then you have the non-custodial. Well, if the non-custodial parent owns the 529, it doesn't go on the custodials, and they're going to be filling out the FAFSA, right? So again, it's always about whose form are you filling out, who's the owner of the account, and then who's the beneficiary. I mentioned earlier, home equity plays a role, right? And there are many colleges, CSS profile schools that, and I'll explain the CSS profile in a few minutes, but it's an additional financial aid form. But there are many CSS profile schools that actually evaluate home equity the same as your checking account. And that could have a really significant impact in terms of how much college costs. A school like NYU, they use every dollar of equity you have in your home and they assess it at 5%. So let's just say you have $1 million in equity in your house. In their eyes, you can pay an extra 50 grand a year for college. And that could ultimately really change if you're going to be paying NYU, let's say 40 or 50 or 100 grand a year for college. It really, really changes the numbers. Boston College does the same thing. They look at every dollar of equity in your house. And we're picking on some of the schools that are up here, but a lot of the CSS profile schools, they either use all of it or they use a portion. And what I mean by a portion is they'll cap it at a multiple of your income, maybe like 1.2 or 2 or 3 times your income. That's the most home equity that they'll use in their calculation, but they're still using home equity. And even if 1 times your income is 100 grand, that's an extra 5 grand a year for the cost of college. That's going to be out of your pocket. So sometimes planning around what schools do and don't use home equity, and also how you report the value of your house, how you report your mortgage, what can be done to reduce the equity, all of that plays a big role. And again, these are steps that you need to take early on, not October of your student's senior year. There was a really big change this past summer for business owners. So for anyone who owns a business, family owned, fewer than 100 full-time employees, you don't even include it on the FAFSA. Now you always include it on the CSS profile. You'll have to report valuations for the business. You'll have to report income information. You have to report quite a bit, and they do take that all into account. Usually if someone owns a business, and your students applying to CSS profile schools, it's always going to be a lot more complex. And there's a lot of money on the line, and there's also a big potential that you might have to do appeals just based on how they look at business information. FAFSA, again, is more straightforward. You don't even have to include business information, small, fewer than 100 employees. But on the CSS profile, you always have to include it. And the colleges that use the profile, they use it because they give a lot of their own money, and they're also usually really expensive. Perfect example is a family I worked with this year. On their business tax return, the total assets for the business was listed over 3 million. So Princeton didn't give the family any money. It took a lot of back and forth, a lot of appeals. I think it was like 3 appeals, and they ended up paying around 40 grand a year, right? And Princeton's almost 100 grand. So that's a $60,000 discount. But again, it's not straightforward, unfortunately, with colleges like that for business owners. There's also something called the business farm supplement. They may want to look at your partnership returns. They might want to look at other information. as well, and kind of do their own assessment in addition to whatever information you already gave to them. Now, for divorced or separated families, I feel like this is a really confusing process because the starting point is figuring out who is the primary parent, right? Who is the parent that provides the most financial support? Can we plan ahead to kind of make that strategic in terms of who we use and still follow the rules? And then in addition to that, well, the CSS profile, a lot of those schools require non-custodial forms. So it's definitely a little bit more of a tricky process, but one of the first starting points is figuring out who that primary parent is, who's going to file the FAFSA, because only one parent in a divorced or separated situation files the FAFSA. And then also when it comes to the CSS profile, what schools are going to look at non-custodial information. It's also important to note if you're remarried and you're the primary parent, your new spouse's information will be included. Now, it's fair to say that there are going to be plenty of families whose student aid index is just too high, right? They're not going to qualify for any need-based aid. If that is your family and you don't want to pay full sticker price for college, which some of the schools listed here are 100 grand, you have to focus on schools that give merit scholarships, right? So think about, we've got Alabama here, we have Denison, we have Case Western, we have Wilmette. There's plenty of colleges across the country that are good. With Syracuse on the other slide, across the country that give merit scholarships. That's going to be your primary source of a discount. Now, an alternative to merit scholarships would also be, well, even at full price, what schools provide a lot of value, right? And I think Purdue is a great example at $45,000 a year, where they don't give any money, but it's going to be $45,000 a year. It's not going to be 100. And depending on where you live in the country, your in-state school might be $40,000 a year, sometimes more. So it could definitely be another possibility. Also, honors colleges at public universities, that's another big area where you could even, your student could even be eligible for additional scholarships too. So you need to plan ahead, but you need to know now if you do or don't qualify for any need-based aid. So that way you can figure out, well, hey, I don't have 100 grand a year and I don't want to pay 100 grand a year for college. So what's going to be my strategy? And you don't want your child going and touring NYU and falling in love with it. And because you have $2 million in equity in your house, they're going to make you pay full price regardless of what your income is. You want to make sure that you're not getting their hopes up and you're also not kind of going down the rabbit hole in terms of looking at the wrong colleges. Now, we had a question earlier, and I promised that I would dive into why do you still even do this if you don't qualify for any need-based aid? A big one is that you might not even know you qualify for need-based aid. I have plenty of families. A perfect example, a family I worked with, the student has over $4 million in a trust. They're getting Pell. They never thought they would get a dime for college. Pell is $7,395 a year, just based on how we were able to fill out their financial aid forms. And we're not, illegally omitting anything. It had to do with a certain federal benefit that the parent qualified for. And other options, a family I worked with made around, it was like $630,000, $640,000 a year. They had 3 kids in college at the same time, and all of their daughters were at $100,000 schools. So they were getting about 20 grand a year per student, right? 20 grand a year per student, 60 grand in free money. But anyways, I won't harp on that too much, but you might be eligible. You don't even realize it. Also, if you have younger children who are in private school and you're paying out of pocket for private school, that could also be considered. Now, merit aid, a lot of colleges, including NYU, you have to fill out the FAFSA and the CSS profile to even be considered for merit scholarships. But there's plenty of colleges across the country where you have to do them just to get merit. And at some colleges like Santa Clara, if you don't fill out the forms the first year, you can't fill them out the second, third, fourth year. Basically, it's if you want institutional aid, you have to apply year one. Even if you don't get any money year in one, if your circumstances change and you want to go back for money, you need to have done the financial aid forms. And college is 4 years. You need to think about it as a 4-year plan, maybe even 5 years, unfortunately. Also, if you want to appeal, whether it be need-based or merit-based aid, you need to fill out the forms. They often, on the need-based side, they won't even consider an appeal. And oftentimes, if you do a merit appeal and you don't file the forms, you don't apply for financial aid, it's going to negatively impact your chances. And then the last reason There's a small loan that every child who files the FAFSA can take. It's called the Federal Direct Student Loan. Skin in the game, a credit builder. There's a million reasons for them to take it. Very, very helpful. It's, again, $5,500 freshman year, a total of $27,000 for the 4 years, but you can't even take that if you don't file the FAFSA. So tons of reasons to do it. Only one reason not to do it, which is you don't want to take the time. Now, what is the FAFSA? So the FAFSA goes live October 1st of senior year. It stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. The base year is always a 2-year look back, and it's a little bit confusing. It's called the prior year. Take your student's high school graduation year, right? If they're currently a junior, that's 2027, and subtract 2. The 2025 tax return would be your base income year. You could do that for any high school grad year. Now, with the FAFSA, only one parent does it, and it's the parent who provides the most financial support. And that is something that you have to decide. It isn't something that there is a formula or a system or anything like that to determine that for you. And you would just simply log in studentaid.gov, and there is a parent account, a contributor account, right? And then there's also a student account, and that you need both accounts to be able to access and submit the FAFSA. Now, the CSS profile, that is an additional financial aid form. It stands for College Scholarship Service Profile, and it goes live usually around October 1st. Right? Or I'm saying around because, like, this year, for example, the CSS profile went live the middle of September. The FAFSA went live a few days before October 1st, but they could always be a little bit earlier. But they should be live by then. And it's an additional financial aid form that roughly 250 colleges use. And the colleges that use this form, they give a lot of their own money, right? They give a lot of what are called institutional grants, which is why they're asking for a lot of your own personal information. Already mentioned this, but the CSS schools do treat, many of them treat home equity as an asset, just as a checking account, as a cash in the bank. And for divorced or separated families, there is the custodial, the primary form, right? The same parent that you use for the FAFSA, they do the main one. And then there is what's called the non-custodial profile, basically an additional CSS profile for the non-custodial household. And you can get that waived, but it's not easy, right? I mean, there has to be, documented reasons of no contact, or there has to be no contact, no financial support. Things like abuse, it's pretty serious to actually convince a college that the other parent shouldn't be responsible to pay at all. And that's basically what you're doing. Business owners, there are more questions. As I've mentioned, it's more complex usually with the CSS profile and a little bit harder, right? How you value your business, it could literally change the cost of college. If you enter one tax line wrong and it's to their favor, they're probably going to use the wrong number, not the number off your tax return. So you really want to make sure that you're thinking through it, you're not overvaluing your business, and you're not taking the wrong line items from your tax return. The CSS profile, it's a way more in-depth form. It's a form that stresses a lot of families out because they ask so many questions, like what kind of car do you drive, and what was the year, make, and model of it, and how much debt do you have on it, right? There are colleges that literally ask that. None of those questions are to help you. They're all to hurt you. They're all to make college more expensive. So it's going to be really important that if your students applying to CSS profile schools, that you understand what's going to be the strategy. How do I answer these questions so college doesn't end up being more expensive? And lastly, you do need to log into the CSS profile with your student's College Board account. Now, from an income perspective, it's always going to be that prior year. But what's really important is line 11. Line 11 is your adjusted gross income. So that's going to take into account things like capital gains, dividends, any business income or losses, wages earned, all of that, right? There are ways to reduce your AGI if you do own a business, even if you don't own a business, but that is the biggest driving factor behind your student aid index, right? And sometimes the tax return does not line up with current income. It happens a lot, right? I mean, they're looking back 2 years. So if that's the case, then there's something called the appeals process. But it's good to know this. It's good to know your income numbers, and it's good to understand what numbers they're primarily using. And student income, there's actually an allowance as part of the federal methodology, the FAFSA, which is $11,510 for last year. It might be a little bit more this year. It sometimes goes up a little bit every year. But that being said, that means your student can earn over $11,000 and it not count against them. Now, any dollar above and beyond that is assessed at 50 cents per dollar. So really significant impact. There is no allowance on the CSS profile, right? So your student can make $3,000 and it actually play a role and be counted as part of that formula for how much financial aid you'd get at a CSS profile school. So if your student's only applying to FAFSA only schools and maybe you own a business, like there is some planning that could be done with this income allowance, but for the most part, it's a helpful number to know. And it's good to know too that even when your child's in school, there's the possibility of them earning money without it reducing how much financial aid you get. Now, in terms of appeals, you want to know your strategy, right? You want to know your circumstances, but you also, when building a school list, want to plan ahead. For example, if your student's applying to RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, they love competing with RPI, Rensselaer Polytech. Same with like Sacred Heart and Quinnipiac. We could go on and on, but that's one strategy, right? Leverage, right? Having other offers to use on appeal. That's part of it because you need to know those schools to add them to the list. But in addition to that, how you file the forms, how you present your case, all of those things, you want to have a plan in place. And there's even some schools that, like Penn State, even if your income went down, unless you're Pell eligible, you're not going to get more money. So it's just good to know, well, if your circumstances change, who's even going to help you and who's not going to help you. So again, it's all about planning ahead and just understanding what's going to be the strategy and basically how are you going to get more money? What's the plan and what colleges can you actually go to for that? Okay, let me stop sharing for a second there. Did we get any questions that
Yeah, one question you can answer while you're putting up stuff to put in the chat. If our house is paid out, but we've taken a home equity loan, will the home equity be reduced by the amount of the loan?
Yes, so your equity in your house is always going to be reduced by any debt against it, right? So if you have $1 million house and you have a $500,000 loan against it, your home equity is going to be $500,000. It's not going to be $1 million. So that's all part of it, and that will always play a role, and that is a question on the CSS profile. So sorry if I was not clear on that before. But it's a good question. And that's part of it. How do you value your house? And is there a way to increase the debt against the house without making major changes? Those are things that you have to figure out, should you do now before we kind of get too far into the financial aid season. Okay, I do want to just screen share. Obviously, I have to screen share like different things about meeting with us and so forth. But I do want to just spend 2 minutes, not even just a minute real quick, on MyCap. Joe shared the link before. But this is what it looks like. If you go put your information in, you'll be able to see net costs at all of the colleges specific to you, not just some general net costs based on an income bracket. And you'll be able to search for schools with it. You'll be able to see what financial aid forms the colleges use. It's going to be a tool in your tool shed in terms of planning for this process and really kind of navigating and figuring out what types of money you're eligible for. So I just wanted to screen share so everyone can get a visual in terms of what it actually looks like. And then in addition to that, I want to screen share. And I'm going to put this one in the chat too. No, do not take out a home equity loan and sink it into a retirement account. Your children could end up applying to Penn State or a FAFSA only school, and it doesn't even matter. That's why it's important to plan, but not just plan blindly in terms of what other impacts, what other ramifications would there be by doing this. So a couple of things. We'll start off by explaining, we get it. This process is confusing. We work with hundreds and hundreds of families each year on navigating this, on saving the money in terms of financial aid, on, Joe, you could speak better to the admission side, but helping them build their school list, get into colleges, essays, applications, all of those things. So we are here to support you with that. And that is, we don't assume anyone knows exactly what help they need. We would love to be able to talk to you to figure out, can we help you? Can we save you money? Can we save you time? Can Joe help your children get into the college that they want to get into? So that's all part of what we do. Do you want to say anything about admissions?
No, I think, we're at time, so
Yeah,
it's totally fine. But yeah, I mean, if you sign up for any of the packages that include admissions, you'd have someone like me helping you every step of the way on everything. So just your personal coach.
you know what? On that note, to meet with us so we can figure out what makes sense for your family. Also, so you get a discount off of our packages, you do need to book a free consultation by midnight tonight. So you would just be able to go, I put the landing page in the chat. You would go there, you would click on an appointment time, and you would get on a call with Joe and myself. And to honor the discount, you would just need to meet with us by 11:26, which we don't even, because of the holiday, we don't even have availability past then anyways. But so that is an action item for tonight. And then in addition to that, we know that there's plenty of families who want to do this process on their own. We would still encourage that at least talk to us to make sure that you're not going down the right path. But for DIYers, the best approach would be our premium membership. And our premium membership gives you all the tools that are actually in the software. A lot of what I screen shared is part of premium, in terms of, unlimited schools and private scholarships and line by line and you name it. To get that is $5 a month. And we said that you would have the recording. I promise you will. It'll be sometime tomorrow on this landing page. You'll also get it emailed to you. Trying to think what else. We say this time of year, action absorbs anxiety. If your student's a high school junior, right, take action, because this whole process is going to go quicker than you know it. You're literally a year away from them being done with everything. All their college applications in, your financial aid applications in. A year is not a lot of time. And you really need to take those steps. If you have a high school sophomore, guess what? You're before the base income year. So maybe you can make some changes that they don't even see on your tax returns. So there's always the earlier you start, the more opportunity you have to reduce the cost of college and to just plan better. I think that's general for everything. But I would
If
just
you
encourage,
work with me and Kevin, you'll be done in 10 months.
yeah.
Remember,
We'll make sure you guys are done quick and save a ton of money. But that being said, no, in all seriousness, please just take action, right? Whether that be meeting with us tonight, whether that be creating a free MyCap account. The longer you wait, we see it. We have families who come to us and they have seniors and it's like crisis. We have 3 days to get things done before a deadline. And those families are flat out paying more for college because they didn't plan ahead. So take action. But let me drop that in the chat one more time. And then sorry for running over everyone. But that is all we had to cover tonight.
thank you for joining us from
Yeah.
across the country, and be safe out there and have a happy holiday, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Coming up.
Happy Thanksgiving.